Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in Iran and the Middle East in the past 24 hours. After several days of relative calm, Iran launched a new ballistic missile attack against U.S. forces in the region on Tuesday. U.S. officials said the attack targeted American facilities in Jordan, and all missiles were intercepted. But the significance is less about the missiles themselves and more about the decision behind them. Tehran appears to be signaling that it believes it can continue applying pressure while trying to force better terms in negotiations. And that brings us back to the core issue driving this entire crisis: the Strait of Hormuz. The fight over Hormuz has become a battle over who gets to define the rules of the global energy system. Iran sees control over the waterway as its most important source of leverage. The United States and its partners see unrestricted navigation as a non-negotiable principle. New diplomatic efforts through Oman have stalled because Tehran is not willing to accept a limited role. Iran rejected a proposal for shared regional management of the strait and instead demanded a larger degree of control. Iranian officials continue to argue that Hormuz is central to Iran's security and future influence. The interesting part is that this debate is creating tension inside Iran itself. The Iranian leadership is not unified on how long it can sustain this confrontation. The IRGC-linked faction, associated with Commander Major General Ahmad Vahidi, appears willing to negotiate but wants to preserve major Iranian influence over the strait. A more pragmatic group that includes President Masoud Pezeshkian, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf appears more concerned about the economic damage caused by continued conflict. And there is a reason for that concern. The Iranian economy is under serious strain. Sanctions, disrupted trade, layoffs, shortages, and currency pressure are creating problems that are difficult for the government to hide. Iranian leaders have always understood that economic pressure can become political pressure. The regime survived decades of sanctions, but prolonged conflict creates a different challenge because the public consequences become much more visible. That pressure is already showing up internally. Protests resurfaced in Esfahan province, with residents demonstrating over the execution of people involved in earlier unrest. It is too early to know whether this becomes a broader movement, but Iranian leaders are clearly watching the domestic environment closely. Outside Iran, the conflict is becoming increasingly regional. Saudi Arabia has now moved into a more direct military role, joining the United States in strikes against Iran-backed groups in Iraq. Washington says those groups were responsible for attacks against U.S. forces and Saudi energy infrastructure. The strikes reportedly hit militia facilities across several Iraqi provinces, and the Iran-backed Popular Mobilization Forces reported dozens of casualties. The important point is what this means politically. For years, Saudi Arabia and Iran competed through diplomacy, economic pressure, and proxy networks. Riyadh has generally preferred avoiding a direct military confrontation with Tehran. That makes Saudi participation in strikes a significant shift. It also creates another challenge for Iraq. Baghdad is caught between two powerful relationships. The United States views Iranian-backed militias as a major threat. Iran views those same groups as essential parts of its regional influence network. The Iraqi government is now trying to prevent its territory from becoming another major front in the conflict, while also managing armed groups that are formally connected to the Iraqi security structure. Iran's broader regional strategy is also playing out in the Red Sea. The Houthis in Yemen have expanded their campaign against Saudi-linked shipping, claiming attacks on vessels and threatening additional restrictions in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The group is now reportedly considering charging fees for ships moving through the waterway, essentially trying to convert military influence into economic leverage. That matters because the world's energy system depends on multiple maritime choke points. Iran is pressuring Hormuz. The Houthis are pressuring Bab el-Mandeb. Together, those efforts create uncertainty for shipping companies, energy markets, and governments trying to keep supply chains moving. China is watching all of this very carefully. Beijing has reportedly opened direct channels with the Houthis to protect Chinese shipping through the Red Sea. Chinese officials are seeking guarantees that their vessels can continue operating without being targeted. and sources say individual ships have received approval to pass. This is a very familiar Chinese approach. Avoid becoming part of the conflict while protecting national interests. Beijing wants continued access to energy supplies and stable trade routes, but it also does not want to inherit responsibility for solving a crisis it did not create. At the same time, China may be helping Iran address one of the vulnerabilities exposed during the conflict: air defense. Reports indicate Iran is seeking hundreds of Chinese-made portable air defense systems. These weapons are designed to counter low-flying aircraft, helicopters, and drones. They are not the kind of systems that dramatically change the balance against advanced air forces, but they can complicate operations by making Iranian military and infrastructure targets harder to strike. The broader message is that Tehran is trying to learn from the war while it fights it. Iran's missile and drone capabilities remain significant, but recent strikes exposed weaknesses in protecting fixed facilities. Now Iran is looking to rebuild those defensive layers. The conflict is also continuing to blur with the war in Ukraine. After Ukraine struck an Iranian cargo ship in the Caspian Sea, Tehran considered a retaliatory strike against Ukraine. Iranian officials initially warned the attack would not go unanswered, but diplomatic engagement between Iranian and Ukrainian officials appears to have reduced tensions for now. Still, the incident highlights how interconnected these conflicts have become. Russia has relied heavily on Iranian drones and military cooperation in its war against Ukraine. Ukraine has increasingly targeted the networks that support that relationship. What happens in the Middle East is now affecting Europe, and what happens in Europe is increasingly affecting the Middle East. The diplomatic pressure is also reaching Washington. President Trump's meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky show how the administration is balancing two major security challenges at the same time. Netanyahu remains focused on Iran's nuclear ambitions and regional threats, while Zelensky continues pushing for more air defense support and weapons cooperation. One final issue worth watching is the information battlefield. U.S. Central Command Commander Admiral Brad Cooper warned that social media posts, videos, and publicly available imagery are providing Iran with valuable intelligence during attacks. In modern warfare, a cell phone video from a base can unintentionally reveal damage assessments, response times, and vulnerabilities. The battlefield is no longer just where weapons hit. It is also the information space surrounding those attacks. That's all for today. Be good to one another, keep your critical thinking switched on, and remember, powerful people can survive a little scrutiny. Find the Daily Brief at restrictedhandling.substack.com.